My name is Rebecca Dawson. I am 40 years old. And the night my husband dragged me away from a VIP table in front of 400 bankers was the night I learned that institutions remember every chair differently from the people sitting in them. The gala was held in the East Ballroom of the Halcyon Hotel in Boston. 400 executives filled the room. Commercial bankers, private equity partners, insurance executives, pension fund managers, regulators, corporate treasurers, senior lawyers, credit analysts who could make a company nervous by raising one eyebrow over dinner. The event belonged to Meridian Commonwealth Bank. My husband, James Calloway, was one of Meridian's most visible executives, Executive Vice President of Corporate Banking, Head of Strategic Accounts, member of the Management Credit Committee, the man who had spent 7 years telling people that relationships were the only asset a bank could not automate. That night, Meridian was celebrating its 100th anniversary and the renewal of a major capital facility for its holding company. James had been working toward the gala for months. He called it the room that decides the next 5 years. I thought he was being dramatic. He was not. Meridian looked solid from the outside. More than $30 billion in assets. Regional branches across New England. A profitable commercial bank. A fast-growing equipment finance business. A wealth division that James loved to mock for charging people to sit still. But Meridian's holding company had borrowed aggressively during a series of acquisitions. A large private credit facility sat above the bank. The facility did not fund ordinary customer deposits. It financed the holding company, technology acquisitions, a specialty lender purchase, capital injections into non-bank subsidiaries, share repurchases before regulators became less enthusiastic about them. The total commitment was $850 million. The single largest economic participant was a private credit fund called Dawson Ridge Partners. My father's firm. James did not know that. At least, not fully. My father, William Dawson, founded Dawson Ridge 36 years earlier. He had been famous in finance once. Not celebrity famous. Useful famous. The kind of man CEOs called when public markets closed and ordinary lenders became nervous. 10 years ago, he stepped down as chief executive. 5 years ago, he stopped appearing at conferences. 3 years ago, he stopped giving interviews. James decided that meant retired. I let him believe it. That sounds manipulative. It was less dramatic in practice. My father really did leave day-to-day management. He gardened badly, collected old maps, spent 3 weeks every summer in Maine, refused to carry 2 phones. But he still chaired Dawson Ridge's investment council. He still controlled a family partnership that was the largest limited partner in several funds. And when a credit exceeded $500 million, William Dawson still read the documents. James knew Dawson Ridge was one of Meridian's creditors. He believed professional managers handled it. He had no idea. My father remained deeply involved in the renewal scheduled to be announced after the gala. I did. Only because Dad told me 2 weeks earlier. Not the terms, just enough to prevent embarrassment. I'm attending Meridian's dinner, he said. You hate galas. I hate speeches. Galas have food. James will be shocked. Does he think I'm dead, financially? Dad laughed. Then he became serious. The facility renewal is confidential until the bank discloses it. I know. Do not tell James. I won't. That includes if he asks. He won't. I was right. James never asked what my father was doing. That had become part of our marriage. He thought he knew. I had been married to James for 11 years. The first 6 were easy. Not perfect. Easy. He was ambitious and funny and impossible to embarrass. I was a municipal bond research analyst when we met, which meant I could spend 40 minutes explaining why a parking authority's debt covenant mattered and still believe I was fun at dinner. James loved that I understood finance. Then he was promoted. Then promoted again. My career became inconvenient. Banking is a small world. My father was William Dawson. James was becoming a senior banker. Every transaction raised conflict questions. Every conference invitation became a discussion about whether I had information I should not have. So, I left institutional research and built a consulting practice, analyzing public infrastructure financing for nonprofits and municipalities. I liked the work. James liked saying I had gone independent. Later, he began saying I didn't really work in banking anymore. True. Then he started acting as if that meant I did not understand banking. Not true. The difference became important. At the Halcyon, the main VIP table sat directly below the stage. 12 seats. The bank president, Olivia Mercer, sat at the center. Beside her, the board chair, the chief risk officer, 2 major investors, James, and several guests whose names were not printed on the public seating chart. My own dinner place was at seat 8, beside James. After dessert, according to the confidential run sheet, that chair would be reassigned to a special guest for the capital announcement. The event team had explained it to me at rehearsal. Mrs. Calloway, after dinner, we'll move you 1 seat toward the aisle before the funding presentation. Why confidential guest? Who? The coordinator smiled. You probably know. I did? My father. The plan was almost ridiculous. During dinner, I sat beside James. For the post-dinner announcement, Dad would take that same chair because the sightline placed him beside Olivia Mercer and directly across from Dawson Ridge's managing partner. My own second chair would be added at the end of the table. A tiny logistical detail, aswasmanis.com, no one outside the event. Bank board and transaction team needed to know. When I entered the ballroom, Vanessa Price was sitting in seat 8. Vanessa was James's senior executive assistant. She had worked with him for 4 years. She managed his calendar, prepared committee materials, organized travel, filtered client access, and had recently begun attending dinners that did not require an assistant. She was 35. Blonda. Precisi. Always 10 minutes early. For 6 months, I had suspected they were sleeping together. There was no single discovery. No lipstick. No hotel room photograph. No text saying I love you. There were patterns. James began taking his phone into the shower. Vanessa's name appeared on weekend calendar holds. A Dallas trip ended Friday, but James returned Sunday. A Bermuda client summit had no corresponding client agenda. A corporate card statement showed 2 rooms in Chicago under a conference booking, 1 upgraded to a suite. I asked James about it. He said Vanessa coordinates travel. Stop reading receipts like they're confessions. I stopped asking. I did not stop noticing. At the gala, Vanessa wore a black dress with a silver neckline and sat in my chair as if she had been assigned there. My place card was gone. James sat beside her. His hand rested on the table near hers. Olivia Mercer had not arrived yet. Several executives had. They watched. I approached. Vanessa. She looked up. Rebecca. You're in my seat. She smiled. Not apologetically. I don't think so. I looked at the small brass number on the table. 8. The seating coordinator put me here. Plans changed. Who changed them? James answered without looking at me. I did. I turned toward him. Why? Vanessa needs to be at this table tonight. She has a seat at table 3. Not anymore. Where am I supposed to sit? He gestured toward table 11. Near the back. Vendor council. Regional directors. A few spouses. I stared. You're moving your wife out of the VIP table for your assistant. Vanessa lifted her champagne. Wives don't matter here. The sentence was quiet enough to sound like a joke, loud enough for 6 people to hear. One banker coughed into his napkin. James said, "Vanessa." But he was smiling, not stopping her. Vanessa continued, "This table is business." I looked at her. "So is the seat." She tilted her head. "What does that mean?" "It means you don't know whose chair you're sitting in." That line was accidental. I was thinking about Dad. Vanessa thought I was threatening her with marital status. She laughed. "Rebecca, you haven't been relevant to Meridian for years." James finally looked at me. "Enough." "Again?" I thought he meant her. He meant me. "Go sit down." "I am trying." "At 11. "No." The word came out calmly. His expression changed. James was used to my avoiding public confrontation. He called it maturity. I had begun to suspect he meant compliance. "Rebecca, Vanessa can move. She needs to be here for the capital presentation." My stomach tightened. "What does Vanessa have to do with the capital presentation?" He hesitated. "Only for a second. She coordinated it." That made no sense. Executive assistants coordinate logistics. They do not sit at the principal table for a holding company funding announcement. Vanessa looked pleased by my confusion. Then she said, "Some people actually know what's happening at this bank." I stared at her. "What exactly is happening?" James stood. "Stop." I looked at him. "Why is she sitting in a seat reserved for a principal?" His eyes narrowed. "How do you know that?" "There." He heard the finance professional he had spent years pretending disappeared. I answered, "Because I read a run sheet." Vanessa laughed. "Of course you did." James reached for my arm. "Walk with me." "No." His fingers closed above my elbow. Not painfully at first. "Rebecca, let go." 4 executives looked away. One did not. Olivia Mercer's chief of staff, Nina Patel, stood near the stage holding a tablet. She watched. James lowered his voice. "You're embarrassing me. Then stop dragging me." His grip tightened. He pulled. My chair struck the back of my knees as I stepped away from the table. Vanessa slid farther into seat 8. Someone at the next table turned. James kept pulling me toward the side aisle. I did not fight him. That was instinct. Not surrender. When a man is stronger than you and angry in public, resistance can become the story instead of what he is doing. So, I walked. His hand stayed around my arm. 400 executives watched in different ways. Some directly. Some through reflections in wine glasses. Some by pretending to study menus. James stopped near a service door. "Are you insane?" I looked at his hand. "Let go." He did. Red marks were already forming where his fingers had pressed. "You do not make a scene tonight." I asked for my seat. "You challenged me in front of Olivia's team." "Olivia isn't even seated yet." "That's not the point." "What is he?" lowered his voice. "Vanessa has done more for this transaction than you understand." "Which transaction, Rebecca?" "What transaction?" His face changed. He had said too much. I knew about the Dawson Ridge facility renewal. He did not know I knew. But why did Vanessa need VIP positioning for it? Then I noticed a folder under his arm. Meridian Commonwealth Bank Funding Renewal, Executive Brief. Vanessa's initials were on the tab. VP. I looked toward the table. She was speaking with the chief risk officer. Too comfortably. James followed my eyes. "Go sit down." "At 11, yes." I said nothing. I took out my phone. His face tightened. "Who are you texting?" I opened the thread marked Dad. "Typed your seat is ready." "Then come in." "Do not announce anything yet." I pressed send. James stepped closer. "Rebecca." I looked at him. "Dad, your seat is ready." 40 seconds later. The ballroom doors opened. The first person to stand was Olivia Mercer, the president of Meridian Commonwealth Bank, then the board chair, then the chief risk officer, then half the VIP table. Vanessa turned. Her smile disappeared. My father entered beside Dawson Ridge's managing partner, chief credit officer, and outside counsel. William Dawson wore a plain black suit. No tuxedo. No spectacle. He saw me standing near the service door. Then he saw James. Then Vanessa. Then seat 8. The events coordinator rushed forward. Mr. Dawson. This way. Vanessa stood slowly. No one asked her to. She understood. The coordinator pulled the chair back. My father looked at the small brass number, then at me. Rebecca. Dad? He touched my arm. Saw the red marks. His face changed. Only for a second. Then he looked toward James. James had gone completely still. My father did not ask what happened. Not there. He walked to the table. Vanessa stepped aside. The place card the coordinator set down read William Dawson, founder. Dawson Ridge Partners. My father sat in the chair my husband had just dragged me away from. Seat 8. The bank president remained standing until he did. Then everyone else sat. James looked at the table, then at me, then at my father. For the first time that night, he understood that the chair had never been about who mattered more to him. It belonged to a process he did not control. The capital announcement did not happen. That was the first consequence. Not the loan disappearing, not James being fired, not my father standing on stage to humiliate anyone. Olivia Mercer leaned toward William before the MC returned to the microphone. They spoke for less than a minute. Then Olivia handed a note to Nina Patel. Nina crossed to the event coordinator. The planned funding presentation was removed from the program. The anniversary gala continued. That distinction mattered. A scholarship award was still presented. A retired branch manager still received a service honor. The bank's jazz ensemble still played after dessert. 400 people still ate chocolate mousse while pretending nobody had watched an executive drag his wife away from the principal table. Meridian did not belong to James. The evening did not either. Olivia approached me 20 minutes later. She was 62. Compact. Silver-haired. And one of the few senior bankers who could make James stop talking by looking at him. Rebecca. Olivia. She glanced at my arm. Do you need medical attention? No. Are you sure? Yes. Security has footage. I assumed. Do you want them to preserve it? Yes. One word. Preserve. I had learned enough about institutions to know that preservation is what you ask for before you know what you want to do. Olivia nodded. Done. Then your father told me the funding announcement should wait. Because of me. Because he believes Dawson Ridge should confirm the bank has no undisclosed governance or expense issue connected to the renewal team. My stomach tightened. Was there already an issue? She hesitated. Bank presidents do not improvise facts. There were questions. About James. About executive travel and relationship expenses. There it was. Before my text. Before my father entered. Before seat 8. Questions already existed. That mattered more than anything. I looked at Vanessa. She had left the VIP table. She now stood beside a sidewall speaking into her phone. How long? 2 weeks. Who was reviewing internal audit? Did James know? He knew a sample review was underway. He did not know the scope had expanded. Did Vanessa? She coordinated most travel files. Of course. Olivia continued. Rebecca. I need to be careful. You are not an employee, director, or lender representative. I know. I can tell you only what affects you personally or what becomes public. I understand. That boundary calmed me. Then she said, I also need to know what happened near the table. I told her. No adjectives. Seat. Vanessa. Comment. James's hand. The drag. The marks. Olivia asked, did he threaten you? No. Hit you? No. Prevent you from leaving? No. Did you ask him to release your arm? Yes. Did he? After we reached the service door. She nodded. Nina will document witnesses. I don't want the bank turning my marriage into an investigation. It already became a workplace issue when a senior executive physically handled a guest during a bank event. I looked at her. Handled. She winced. Forward. We both knew why. Language can hide force without lying. She corrected herself. When he grabbed and dragged you. Better. James approached before we could say more. Olivia. Can we talk? She looked at him. Tomorrow, the funding announcement. Tomorrow? Dawson Ridge is here. I'm aware. He lowered his voice. We've been working on this for 9 months. So another 12 hours will not kill it. James looked toward my father. William was speaking with the bank's chief risk officer. Martin Hale. Not related to my family. Different Hale. James said, is this because Rebecca texted her father? Olivia's face did not change. No. Then why? Because internal audit raised questions relevant to executive certifications supporting the renewal package. He went pale. What questions tomorrow? Olivia. James. That ended it. For the first time in our marriage, I saw him treated the way he treated me. Not yelled at. Not punished. Denied immediate control over the answer. He hated it. Vanessa returned. James. I need you. Olivia looked at her. No. Vanessa froze. Olivia continued. Tonight. You will not remove. Amend. Forward. Or delete any travel. Expense. Calendar. Or transaction preparation records. IT has already placed a hold. Vanessa's face changed. James snapped. That's ridiculous. Olivia looked at him. Do you want me to repeat it? He said nothing. Then my father appeared beside me. He did not look at James first. Your arm. I'm fine. That is not an answer. It hurts. He nodded. Hotel Doctor, no. Urgent care. Dad. Rebecca. Olivia almost smiled. Some dynamics survive billions of dollars. I agreed. Then William finally looked at James. You and I should not discuss the credit tonight. James swallowed. William. This is being distorted. Then, independent review will undistort it. I would never jeopardize Meridian's relationship with Dawson Ridge. My father studied him. That is an interesting choice of sentence. James blinked. What you said, Meridian's relationship? Yes. Not yours. James looked confused. My father continued, I've been told you describe yourself internally as the senior relationship bridge to Dawson Ridge. My stomach turned. James's eyes sharpened. Who told you that? Your bank president's funding memorandum? Olivia's face changed slightly. That was apparently confidential. William corrected himself. A summary of the memorandum. Still. James looked at me. I understood before he spoke. You talked to him. No. Then how would my father? Interrupted. Rebecca and I do not discuss Meridian's credit terms. She's your daughter. Yes. And you've never discussed the facility, not beyond facts already appropriate for her to know. James laughed. Come on. William's expression went flat. That assumption may be part of the problem. I felt cold. What problem? My father looked at Olivia. She answered. Several internal documents describe James as having unique access to Dawson Ridge's founder and family capital. I stared at my husband. James said, That's true. My father said no. Silence. James recovered quickly. I mean relational access. Family connection. Have I ever discussed Meridian credit with you privately? You've discussed markets. That was not my question. James looked at me. Then away. No. Have I ever promised you Dawson Ridge would renew? No. Have I authorized you to represent my views to Meridian management? No. The answers sounded small. They were not. I come. Olivia said tomorrow. Again. The conversation stopped. Urgent care documented bruising along my upper arm and shoulder. No fracture. No nerve injury. The clinician asked whether my husband had done this before. No. Ever grabbed you? I almost said no, automatically. Then memory offered smaller moments. A hand around my wrist during an argument in Paris. His palm against my back, steering me out of a client dinner. Fingers tightening around my elbow when I contradicted him at a family party. Not enough to hurt. Enough to direct. Not like this. The clinician wrote something. I hated that answer. Because it meant the behavior had a history without having a history I had named. I stayed that night with my father. He owned a townhouse in Boston that he used during board weeks. Atunu chasse a. M. James texted. I am sorry I grabbed you. Atunu opt. You blindsided me in front of the most important people in my career. At 111 I should not have touched you. But you knew tonight mattered. The apology lasted 2 sentences before becoming an explanation. At 114, did you know William was the lender principal tonight? I stared at the phone. At 117, how long have you known? At 122, Rebecca. Answer me? I did not. At 131, Vanessa's seating was operational. You turned it into something else. That sentence almost made me laugh. Operational. At 142, whatever you think is happening with Vanessa is not what you think. At 145, please don't talk to your father about the travel files. That one mattered. I forwarded it to my attorney. Caroline Wu. She answered at 203. Do not reply. Save screenshots. We will discuss in the morning. Then my father knocked on the guest room door. Awake, obviously. He entered carrying 2 cups of tea. You hate tea. Your mother bought too much. I'm finishing inventory. My mother had been dead 4 years. Dad still called unopened boxes inventory. He sat in a chair near the window. For a minute. Neither of us talked about James. Then I asked, did he use my name to get the renewal? No. Are you sure? He used his relationship to you as evidence of access. Isn't that the same? No? Explain. William leaned back. Credit decisions are not made because a borrower's executive married my daughter. I know, but internal politics can be influenced by perceived relationships. James told Meridian he could read Dawson Ridge through me. Something close. My face burned. Did it work? Apparently. That hurt more than I expected. James had spent years telling me I was outside banking now. At the same time, he had used my family connection as invisible professional capital. I asked, why didn't anyone at Dawson Ridge correct it? Because we didn't know how he described himself internally. What did he say to your team? Professionally appropriate things. So he knew the boundary. Yes. That was the part. James did not misunderstand. He behaved differently depending on the audience. To Dawson Ridge, formal. Independent. No family pressure. Inside Meridian, I know the Dawsons. I understand the founder. I can manage the relationship. My father said, do not make this bigger before the records do. I looked at him. That's your advice. Always. You're not angry. He stared at the bruises on my arm. I am extremely angry. Then why are you so calm? Because my anger has no place in Meridian's credit committee. There it was. The boundary James had never understood. Power is not the ability to act while angry. It is knowing which role has the right to act. My father continued. Dawson Ridge will appoint a conflict-free credit team for the renewal review. I will not vote on any response that arises from James's conduct toward you. You'll recuse. From that portion. What about the underlying facility? If the review shows unrelated credit issues, I may still have duties. That sounds complicated. It is. He took a sip of terrible tea. Complicated is not the enemy. James always thought it was. That difference defined the next 6 months. At 9 the next morning, Meridian's board risk committee met without James. By 10:15, he was placed on paid administrative leave for 5 business days. The public reason: pending review of executive travel, expense certification, workplace conduct, and representations related to the holding company funding process. That sentence did more damage to James than the gala video. The video was embarrassing. The notice touched his professional identity. By noon, financial reporters were calling Meridian B1. 3 corporate clients asked whether James still controlled their accounts. Betrayal. An industry newsletter posted, Meridian EVP on leave as credit renewal announcement delayed. No mention of Vanessa. No mention of me. No mention of my father. Good. Then the gala footage appeared online. Someone at table 6 had recorded James pulling me through the aisle. The clip began too late to show Vanessa in my seat. It showed James gripping my arm, me saying let go, James pulling, me walking after him. 400 people watching. The caption said, Bank exec drags wife out of VIP area before mystery lender arrives. Not wrong. Not complete. Another clip showed William Dawson taking seat 8. That one spread faster. The internet invented everything the documents had not yet established. Husband throws wife out. Then her billionaire father takes his place. My father is wealthy. Seat 8 was not James's place. Still. Another mistress stole wife's seat from man who funds entire bank. Also false. Dawson Ridge did not fund the entire bank. The fund participated in holding company credit. Details lose against a good caption. I issued no statement. James did. Through counsel, I regret physically guiding my wife away from a private disagreement during last night's event. I should have handled the moment differently. Any suggestion that my personal conduct affected Meridian's institutional funding process is false. Physically guiding. I read it 3 times. Then sent it to Caroline. She replied, save. Do not respond. At 3. Meridian's internal audit team asked to interview me. I declined until Caroline could attend. Not because I had anything to hide. Because I had finally stopped assuming cooperation meant entering every room alone. The interview took place the next morning. Lead auditor Eleanor Briggs. Compliance counsel David Ng. Caroline sat beside me. Eleanor began, We are not asking you to investigate your husband. Good. We are asking whether you can confirm or deny certain events involving your own knowledge. Travel. Or family relationships. Okay. First question. Did you accompany James Calloway to Bar Harbor? Men. On July 18th through 20th last year. No. Did your father know? Was William Dawson in Maine that weekend? I thought, no. He was in Montreal for a museum board meeting. Eleanor looked down. Are you certain? Yes. I picked him up at the airport Monday. She wrote something. Did James tell you why he was going to Maine, a Dawson Ridge relationship meeting? Caroline looked at me. I continued. He said one of Dad's portfolio managers had a summer place near Bar Harbor. Did he name the manager? No. Did he tell you Vanessa Price was traveling? No. Eleanor placed an expense report in front of me. Bar Harbor, Dawson Ridge, relationship development. Airfare for 2. Resort suite. Car rental. Client meals. Spa charge reversed and resubmitted as hotel incidentals. Total 8. 760. Travelers James Calloway. Vanessa Price. I looked at the dates. The resort was 30 minutes from my father's summer house. James had asked me the week before, "Is your dad in Maine right now?" I had answered no. Canada. At the time, I thought he was considering a meeting. Now I understood. He was checking whether my father might see him. My stomach turned. Eleanor asked, "Do you know whether any Dawson Ridge employee met with James in person that weekend?" No. The audit later confirmed none did. There was one 27-minute phone call with a Dawson Ridge associate on Friday afternoon. James classified the entire weekend as relationship development. The call concerned ordinary market conditions. No credit renewal. No confidential negotiation. The rest of the weekend belonged to James and Vanessa. That was the first trip. There were 11 more. Chicago, Dallas, Bermuda, New York, Palm Beach, Washington, San Francisco. Not every trip was fake. Most included real business. That was what made the review difficult. Chicago Real Client Conference. 2 extra nights. Suite upgrade. Vanessa in adjacent room. Then only 1 room after the conference ended. Dallas Real Borrower meeting Friday. Return flight Sunday. Saturday concert tickets charged to client entertainment. No client attended. Bermuda, Real Bank Leadership Retreat. Vanessa's airfare legitimate. Private catamaran build to team development. Only James and Vanessa on manifest. New York funding roadshow. Real meetings. NAs. 400 jewelry purchase, coded as executive relationship gift. The bracelet Vanessa wore at the gala. Not all of it. The store receipt showed a watch for a retiring client executive and the bracelet on the same invoice. James later reimbursed nothing. The pattern was not enormous. Preliminary personal or unsupported amount, $68. Ling ling ling. Meridian spent more than that on office coffee in a year. The audit committee did not care only about size. James had signed quarterly certifications that executive expenses were business-related and that no undisclosed personal relationship created conflicts in vendor or reimbursement decisions. Vanessa was not a vendor, but she controlled documentation. And James approved her expenses. That was a conflict. Then Eleanor asked me a question I did not expect. "Did James ever ask you to arrange meetings with Dawson Ridge?" Yes. "How often early in our marriage?" "Several times." "Recently?" "Rarely." "Can you estimate maybe twice in 3 years?" "What happened?" "Once I gave him the public number for a conference organizer because he wanted to invite Dad. Once I told him to contact Dawson Ridge's institutional team directly." "Did you ever arrange a credit discussion?" "No." "Did you ever communicate your father's view of Meridian's facility to James?" "No." "Did you know James told Meridian management that he could read Dawson's sentiment through family channels?" I stared at her. "No." She turned the screen. An internal strategy memo. Meridian Holdco, renewal, relationship map. Relationship lead James Calloway. Rationale long-standing personal connection to Dawson family, provides non-transactional access and early read on sponsor concerns. Sponsor? Dawson Ridge. Another line, JC can use family channel to test renewal posture prior to formal lender conversation. My face became hot. "Did he?" Eleanor asked. "Use me, yes." "No." "Did he ever ask what your father thought about Meridian?" "Of course." Context, dinner. News. General conversation. "Did he use your answers at work?" "I don't know." Caroline leaned closer. "You don't need to speculate." I nodded. Eleanor continued. "Do you remember James asking whether your father was concerned about Meridian's acquisition debt last spring?" "Yes." "We had been eating pasta." James said, "Your dad's still bear—" "The regional banks," I said. "Dad is bearish on anyone who calls leverage a strategy." We laughed. Then, "Does he think Meridian overpaid for Franklin Equipment Finance?" I said. "He never told me." James asked, "Has he mentioned Meridian at all?" I said, "Not recently." A normal marital conversation. At least. I thought so. The next day, James wrote in an internal note, Family Channel indicates no acute concern from Dawson founder Re Franklin integration. I had never said that. I had said Dad had not mentioned Meridian recently. James converted absence of concern into evidence of no concern. That was the second professional boundary he crossed. Not stealing information. Translating silence into intelligence. Eleanor showed 3 more examples. James to Treasury Dawson. Family tone remains constructive. Source me, saying Dad had enjoyed a bank economist speech. James to Olivia. No sign of founder resistance to extension. Source. My father not complaining at Thanksgiving. James to Funding Committee family relationship provides comfort that any pricing reset can be managed relationally before documentation. That one made me angry. Managed relationally. Eleanor looked at me. Did your father ever tell you he would negotiate Meridian pricing through family channels? No. Did you tell James that? No. Did you authorize him to imply it? No. The audit interview lasted 3 hours. At the end, Eleanor said, We may need to speak again. Fine. Then Caroline asked, Can Rebecca ask one question? Eleanor nodded. I said, Was this review opened because of the gala? No. Why was it opened? Expense analytics. What triggered that? She hesitated. Then looked at counsel. David Ng answered, A new travel control system flagged repeated post-conference extensions and relationship development expenses, lacking identified external attendees. Who reviewed it first? Expense controls. Did someone raise James specifically? Yes. Who? David looked at Caroline. That information may be protected while the internal process remains open. Fair. I left with one unexpected comfort. The system had noticed before I did. Maybe late. Still, the world did not depend on my father walking through a door. That afternoon, Olivia Mercer called Dawson Ridge's independent credit review team. William was not on the call. The fund did not cancel the renewal. Instead, it requested updated governance certifications, expense review status, confirmation of management authority, and a revised funding timeline. Meridian had 24 days before the existing facility's renewal window became urgent. 24 days. Enough time to review. Not enough time to pretend nothing happened. James called that lender pressure. Olivia called it ordinary credit discipline. The distinction became the center of the next fight. The person who first questioned James's travel was not a director. She was 28 years old and worked on the 4th floor. Her name was Tessa Monroe, Senior Expense Control Analyst. A title James would not have remembered if someone asked him at dinner. Tessa's job was to review corporate card exceptions after Meridian installed a new analytics system. The system did not accuse Fang Very. It compared who traveled, for what event, which attendees appeared in calendars, how long did hotel stays extend beyond business dates, were client meals matched to customer records. Did repeated expenses cluster around the same employees? James and Vanessa produced a pattern. Not enough to prove an affair. Enough to ask questions. Tessa opened a review ticket 6 weeks before the gala. Her first note read, Repeated executive travel extensions involving J. Callaway, V. Price. Several relationship development codes identify Dawson Ridge, despite no corresponding external attendee in CRM. Recommend manager substantiation. The ticket went to James's finance business partner, Edward Mills. Edward asked Vanessa for supporting records. She sent calendars. The calendars showed client conference, bank dinner, funding call, investor meeting, complete enough to close. Tessa did not close it. She checked CRM. No Dawson Ridge attendees. No registered clients at 2 dinners. A funding call lasted 27 minutes on a 3-day trip. She escalated. Edward wrote, Executive Office confirms broader relationship development purpose. Amounts immaterial. Close unless policy issue. Tessa replied, "Policy issue is classification integrity, not amount." I liked her immediately. James did not. Internal chat showed James, "Why is Monroe reopening my travel Edward news system? She is being literal." James, then explain, executive relationship management is not a receipt matching exercise. Edward will handle. Tessa's ticket remained open. 2 days later, Vanessa called her. No recording. Tessa wrote a contemporaneous note. VP stated, "Senior executives require discretion," and asked whether review could be resolved without involving internal audit. I explained, "Repeated exceptions require documentation." VP said, "J. Callaway is managing Dawson relationship directly, and detailed attendee lists may be sensitive." Sensitive. A useful word when details are missing. Tessa escalated to internal audit. That happened 12 days before the gala. James learned only that a sample review had begun. He did not know Tessa had preserved the specific Dawson-coded trips. Then came the gala. His wife, his assistant, seat 8. My father's name card. The next morning, Tessa added one line to her file. Potential conflict confirmed by public event context. Preserve all executive office travel support. That sentence made the review much harder to dismiss. As family revenge, Tessa did not know me, had never met my father, had never attended a Dawson Ridge meeting. She simply read codes and asked why reality did not match them. James's lawyer later called her an inexperienced analyst, interpreting relationship banking through a checklist. That sentence leaked. Employees did not like it. Meridian's commercial bankers knew exactly how often junior control staff were dismissed as people who didn't understand the business. Olivia Mercer hated the phrase. At an internal town hall, she said, "If a control only works after the employee understands why a senior executive deserves an exception, it is not a control." The quote spread internally. James's supporters called it grandstanding. Maybe. It was also true. On the 4th day of his leave, James requested a formal meeting with the board risk committee. His argument had 3 parts. First, the personal expenses were small and could be reimbursed. Second, relationship banking legitimately includes travel and informal contact that cannot always be mapped to CRM entries. Third, the Dawson relationship had in fact benefited Meridian because James's family connection created trust, even if no confidential information passed. That third argument was dangerous. His attorney should have stopped him. Instead, James leaned into it. He presented a slide titled, "Non-Transactional Relationship Value." Examples: William Dawson attended our home twice. Rebecca facilitated early introductions. Family familiarity reduced access friction. James understood Dawson communication style. Personal relationship supported candid market dialogue. All true at some level. Then, this relational capital contributed to Meridian's ability to manage Dawson Ridge as a strategic creditor. I stared at the slide later when it entered the audit record. Relational capital. My marriage had become an intangible asset. The board asked James, "Did Rebecca know you described the relationship this way?" "No." "Did William Dawson?" "No." "Did Dawson Ridge not formally?" "Did you disclose internally that Rebecca no longer worked in institutional banking and did not discuss facility terms with her father?" "I never said she did discuss facility terms." Again, narrow language. He had not said I gave him terms. He said he could read sentiment. The board chair asked, "What did family channel mean?" James answered, "Context." "What context? Tone. Access. Relationship confidence. Did you ever tell your colleagues that William Dawson had given you a view when he had not?" "No." That answer did not survive documents. Not cleanly. A funding team email from 6 months earlier. Treasury. Any sense whether Dawson pushes for 75 bits per second? James William thinks current economics are broadly fair. My concern is duration. My father had never told James that. Where did it come from? At dinner the previous Sunday, Dad had complained about private credit funds chasing yield generally. He said, everyone wants spread. Duration is what kills you when the world changes. James was there. 2 days later. He wrote, William thinks current economics are broadly fair. Main concern is duration. He had turned a general market comment into a lender-specific view. The sentence might have been directionally right. That was not the point. The board chair asked, did William Dawson make that statement about Meridian? James paused. No. Then, why is his name attached? I was summarizing my read. Using his name. Yes. That was the third professional line. Not theft. Attribution. James had built status by making his interpretations sound closer to the source than they were. When the meeting ended, the risk committee extended his leave. Not because of the affair, because the review had expanded into relationship representations. That same afternoon, Vanessa hired a lawyer. Her name was Camille Green. Camille contacted Meridian's general counsel and requested a cooperation framework. James immediately called Vanessa. The call went unanswered. Then he texted. We know that because Vanessa later produced the messages. James, do not overreact. James, this is expense cleanup. Not a criminal case. James, we need one story on business purpose. James, call me. James, Vanessa. James, if you start freelancing explanations, you will make this worse for both of us. Camille told her not to reply. She did not. The phrase one story became important, not because it proved conspiracy, because independent explanations are what investigations require. James wanted consistency before facts had been separated. Vanessa's first interview changed the travel math. She admitted the affair. 13 months. She admitted the extra hotel nights. The catamaran. The concert. The suite upgrades. The bracelet. She denied believing the bank would absorb them permanently. Her explanation, James told me we would true up personal portions after his year-end compensation. True up. Another finance phrase. The investigators asked, was there a written reimbursement schedule? No. Did he reimburse any amount? No. Did you? No. Why? Because I assumed he would handle it. Again. Expected future action, replacing present compliance. Vanessa produced a spreadsheet. Personal allocations. JC, VP. She had kept it privately. Rose. Chicago Extension, 2 nights. Dallas concert, 2 tickets. Bermuda Catamaran. Bar Harbor weekend portion. Varon Bracelet. Palm Beach Spa. New York dinner. Column. Estimated personal share. Total, 641. 840. Close to internal audit's number. I expected that document to make her look worse. Instead, it complicated things. She had tracked what should be repaid. That suggested she knew expenses were personal. It also supported her claim that repayment had been discussed. Then investigators found James's comments inside the spreadsheet. Shared document history. James leave until comp closes. James will settle after renewal. James don't reimburse piecemeal. Creates noise. There. After renewal. The Dawson Ridge facility. He wanted the personal expense cleanup delayed until the funding renewal closed. Why? His lawyer said, timing and simplicity. The audit committee asked whether repayment before the gala would have triggered scrutiny of his executive certifications. Probably. A sudden $60,000 reimbursement might have generated questions. So he delayed, not necessarily because the money mattered, because the review did. Vanessa also explained, seat 8. I thought it was mine. Why James told me I needed to sit at principal table for the funding announcement. Did he know William Dawson would take that chair? No. Did you? No. Did you know Rebecca was assigned there for dinner? Yes. Why did you tell her wives don't matter? Vanessa looked down. Because I was cruel. No strategy. No excuse. Then I thought James was going to be named Chief Commercial Officer after the renewal. He told me I would become his Chief of Staff. There it was. The seat was career positioning. Again. Not just romance. James planned to use the gala announcement as the beginning of a leadership transition. Meridian's current Chief Commercial Officer was retiring in 6 months. Olivia Mercer had not promised James the role. James believed the Dawson renewal would make him the obvious choice. Vanessa believed becoming visible beside him at the principal table would make her future role look natural. They were staging succession before approval. That pattern was becoming familiar. Expected board decision. Expected lender renewal. Expected reimbursement. Expected marriage outcome. Act now, formalize later. The board asked Vanessa, "Did James tell you he would leave Rebecca?" She took a long time. Yes. When after the renewal? Of course. Everything happened after the renewal. Expense repayment. Promotion. A fair disclosure. Divorce. The facility had become a border between the life James had and the life he wanted. He believed if he crossed it successfully, everything else could be reorganized afterward. That was why my father taking seat 8 frightened him, not because William could destroy the bank with one phone call. Because the future James had scheduled suddenly contained another decision-maker. Meridian had a funding problem before James became one. That fact saved the bank from turning the investigation into theater. The existing Dawson Ridge facility matured in 7 months. The renewal had been intended to extend it for 4 years and increase commitments from $850 million to $1 billion. Why increase? Because Meridian wanted to buy a digital payments company and refinance expensive acquisition debt. The bank's treasury team had spent 9 months negotiating. Dawson Ridge was not the only possible lender. It was the cheapest serious one. That distinction mattered. Once the gala announcement was delayed, another private credit group called Arborcrest Capital contacted Meridian. Arborcrest offered to lead a replacement facility. Higher pricing. More covenant. Less family conflict. James immediately supported it. His written proposal to the board said Meridian should remove any appearance that a lender related to an executive spouse can influence management outcomes. The sentence was smart. Painfully smart. If Meridian replaced Dawson Ridge after his leave, James could claim the bank chose institutional independence over family pressure. Olivia Mercer did not dismiss the argument. Neither did the board. The chief risk officer said, even without this incident, concentration with one private credit sponsor deserves review. Dawson Ridge held 42% of the existing facility. Large. Not total. If the bank increased the line to $1 billion and Dawson maintained its share, dependence would grow. The risk committee asked Treasury to model 3 structures. Option A, renew with Dawson Ridge-led syndicate. Lowest cost. Fastest execution. Largest concentration. Option B, move to Arborcrest-led facility. Higher cost by approximately 30 basis points. More lender diversification. No, Avery, sorry. Dawson Family Optics. Option C, split. The facility between 2 coordinated tranches led by different credit groups. Slightly higher cost than A. Lower concentration. More complex documentation. No option involved my father deciding whether Meridian lived or died. That was important. The bank had choices. My father wanted Dawson Ridge to remain competitive. He also knew the optics. He recused from borrower conduct issues tied to me, but remained entitled to participate in broader fund strategy through procedures designed by Dawson Ridge's Conflicts Committee. Then he did something James did not expect. He supported reducing Dawson Ridge's share. Not leaving. Reducing. The fund's independent credit team proposed Dawson Ridge commitment falls from 42% to 28%. A second institutional lender takes a larger tranche, Pricing remains near the original renewal economics. Meridian obtains broader funding. James called it a concession. My father called it portfolio management. Olivia called it useful. The board began leaning toward option C. That damaged James's narrative. If Dawson Ridge reduced concentration voluntarily, it became harder to describe the bank as captured by my father. Then the internal audit found Tessa Monroe's personnel review. 3 weeks after she escalated James's travel, her manager, Edward Mills, drafted a quarterly evaluation. Strong technical performance, high attention to detail, needs greater understanding of commercial context, can become overly rigid in executive expense review. Normal criticism, maybe deserved. Then internal chat showed James had influenced it. James to Edward Monroe seems smart, but doesn't understand relationship banking. Edward, she's controls. Being literal is her job. James literal without judgment becomes obstruction. Edward, you want me to coach James? Yes. Don't make it formal. Edward understood. No threat. No demotion. But then James, and keep her off renewal prep. We don't need junior noise in lender work. Tessa had never been assigned to renewal prep. Still, the instruction mattered. He wanted the analyst who questioned his travel kept away from a process where the same travel was described as Dawson relationship development. Internal audit added potential retaliation, control function interference. James denied retaliation. He said, I questioned her commercial judgment. The committee asked, why would an expense analyst need commercial judgment to verify hotel dates? Because senior relationship travel is not always reducible to attendee lists. Then why tell her manager to keep her off renewal work? Because she was not qualified for it. Was she scheduled for it? No. Then what were you preventing? He had no good answer. Vanessa's communications made it worse. Vanessa to James. Tessa escalated Bar Harbor. James again, Vanessa. She wants named Dawson attendee. James, tell Ed to shut it. Vanessa, he tried. James, then I will. No criminal conspiracy. A senior executive trying to make a control question disappear. That is enough to matter at a bank. Banks are built on people whose job is to be annoying. Compliance. Risk. OD. Credit review. Their inconvenience is intentional. A bank where business leaders can silence them is not merely culturally unhealthy. It can become unsafe. Olivia said that privately to the board. Then she made a difficult admission. She had enabled James. Not the travel. His internal influence. For years. She praised him for getting things done. When risk teams slowed client onboarding, James called her. When Treasury wanted more documentation, James negotiated exceptions. When lawyers said a relationship needed formal review, James found someone senior enough to decide it was immaterial. Often he was right. That was the problem. Success trains institutions to forgive process shortcuts. Olivia wrote in her own board memorandum, my management style rewarded James for resolving friction quickly. I did not consistently distinguish between resolving friction and bypassing the function that created it. I read that sentence later when the report became part of a governance summary. It mattered that the bank president included herself. James's defenders had been arguing that everyone loved his methods when they produced revenue. True. Accountability that stops at the person who finally gets caught is incomplete. The board required Olivia to sponsor a control remediation plan. She accepted. No resignation. No theatrical guilt. Responsibility scaled to conduct. Then, an even stranger thing happened. Dawson Ridge's own independent review found one of its employees had contributed to James's mythology. A relationship director named Colin Reeves had known James socially for years. Golf. Charity dinners. 2 family events. Colin sometimes answered James's informal market questions. Not credit terms. General views. He also enjoyed being treated inside Meridian as someone with special access to William Dawson. One internal Meridian email said, "Colin indicates William's still constructive on us." When Dawson Ridge reviewed Colin's messages, it found he had written to James' boss, not losing sleep over Meridian. Who was boss William? No. Colin's direct supervisor, managing partner Andrew Bell. James interpreted boss as my father, or allowed others to. Colin never corrected. Why his interview answer was embarrassing. It made me sound more senior. I almost laughed when Dad told me. The whole system was status borrowing. James borrowed me. Colin borrowed my father. Vanessa borrowed James. Meridian borrowed Dawson credibility. Dawson staff borrowed founder proximity. Everyone standing closer to the chair than their actual role justified. Dawson Ridge disciplined Colin for sloppy attribution and strengthened rules around informal borrower communications during active credit processes. My father hated that. Not the discipline. The fact that his own firm had helped create the ambiguity. He told me, "I spent 30 years making people think founder access mattered. I cannot act surprised when employees trade on it." That was the second time the investigation turned back toward him. Good. No family gets to be the moral control group. Then James requested reinstatement before the funding decision. His argument: the bank needed its strongest relationship executive while lenders were being restructured. Several directors agreed. Revenue had begun to wobble. 2 large corporate clients delayed mandates because they were unsure who represented them. A healthcare borrower asked to move its relationship away from Meridian if James left. An industrial client said, "We bank with James." Not your org chart. That is every bank's dream until the banker becomes a risk. Olivia proposed a compromise. James would remain on leave from management authority, but could participate in 3 supervised client transition calls. No travel. No expenses. No personnel direction. No lender contact. No Vanessa. No Tessa's department. No funding negotiation. James hated the conditions. Then accepted. The first call was with a manufacturing CEO named Harold Stone. Harold said, "James, tell me, this is nonsense." James looked at Olivia on the video screen, then answered, "It isn't nonsense." Harold went quiet. "I am under review for expense and conduct issues. Meridian has a team that knows your account. Do I trust them? Yes. Do you?" James paused. "Yes." That answer helped the bank more than pretending innocence would have. He transferred the relationship to a senior banker named Amara Lewis. Amara had worked under him for 9 years. After the call, Harold stayed. The second client stayed too. The third moved part of its business elsewhere. Not every relationship can be institutionalized. That was useful data. Meridian learned exactly how much key person risk James represented. The answer meaningful. Not fatale. James learned something harsher. Clients who said they banked with him could learn another name. I learned it too. For years. James had organized our marriage around the idea that his career was unusually fragile. He could not miss dinners. Could not turn down travel. Could not anger certain clients. Could not take full vacations. Could not step away. Because people banked with him. The institution adapted in weeks. That did not mean his work was unimportant. It meant importance and indispensability are not the same thing. The funding committee reached a preliminary decision on day 12. Option C. Dual lead structure. Dawson Ridge would remain the largest individual lender but at a smaller commitment. Arbor Crest would join as co-lead. 2 insurance accounts would take additional pieces. Meridian would pay slightly more. No single private credit group would control more than 30% of commitments. The bank had used the scandal to fix a concentration issue that existed before it. That was good governance. James called it the opposite. In a letter to the board, he wrote, "We are paying millions in incremental interest to create the appearance that the Dawson relationship is less important after an event involving Dawson's founder's daughter." He was right about the cost. Over 4 years. The structure could cost several $1,000,000 more than the cheapest concentrated option. The board had to decide whether diversification was worth it. Risk has a price. So does independence. No answer is free. The board did not vote yet. They asked Treasury for one more analysis. Then my father asked Dawson Ridge to remove his name from the next credit presentation. Not his firm. His name. The revised slide said, Dawson Ridge Partners 28% proposed commitment. No founder relationship. Dawson family. William. Just institutional capital. When James saw the revised materials, he understood something. I think he had never truly believed. The relationship could continue without him, and without my father personally. The chair at the gala had been symbolic. The facility was not by. James and I spoke in person 9 days after the gala. Not at home. Not at Meridian. A conference room in Caroline Wu's office. His lawyer sat in another room. Caroline sat beside me for the first 10 minutes. Then left after confirming we both wanted a private marital conversation, with no discussion of confidential bank materials beyond what we already knew personally. James looked exhausted. No tie. No pocket square. No polished banker smile. The bruises on my arm had turned yellow at the edges. He noticed. I'm sorry. You already said that. I know. Which part are you sorry for? He looked at the table. Dragging you. Why did you? Because you were disrupting the table. I almost laughed. He heard himself. That sounded terrible. It sounded accurate. He rubbed both hands over his face. I needed that night to go right. Why? You know why. I know the bank had a funding announcement. More than that. I waited. He looked at me. Olivia was going to announce the commercial leadership succession after the credit renewal. My stomach tightened. What succession? Nothing final. Then why call it a succession? He exhaled. David Knox is retiring as Chief Commercial Officer. I was the internal favorite. Did Olivia tell you? Not directly. Who did people? Of course. Expectation. What did the renewal have to do with it? I built the lender relationship. I was supposed to be the executive who proved Meridian could manage institutional capital after the acquisitions. You built Dawson Ridge. I built Meridian's relationship with Dawson Ridge. No. He looked up sharply. What? You managed Meridian's side of it. Dawson Ridge has its own people. Rebecca. Don't do that. Do what minimize what I do, because you're angry. That was fair enough to make me stop. Fine. You were important. I was more than important. There. What? That's the part. He stared. I continued. You turn importance into entitlement. His face hardened. That's not what happened. Then explain Vanessa's seat. He looked away. She was going to be my chief of staff. Had the bank approved that? No. Had Olivia approved your promotion? No. Had the board approved the renewal? No. Had Dad approved the facility? No. Had you reimbursed the personal expenses? No. Had you told me about Vanessa? No. Had you filed for divorce? Silence. That one landed. You told her you were leaving me after the renewal. His eyes shifted. So she told them everything. Answer. He looked down. I had talked to a lawyer. My chest tightened. When 3 months ago, did you prepare papers? A draft? Where not filed? That wasn't my question. Yes. I sat very still. I had imagined the affair. I had not imagined a schedule. Why after the renewal? Because I didn't want personal instability during the facility process. I stared at him. Personal instability. Our marriage. Did you plan to tell me before the gala? No? After, within a few weeks. And Vanessa knew? Yes. Did your family? No. Olivia? No. So the only person who knew you planned to leave me was the woman sitting in my seat. He closed his eyes. Yes. That was the cleanest betrayal. Not sex. Sequence. He had arranged my ignorance around a professional milestone. Again. Later. After close. After renewal. After promotion. He had turned my life into deferred disclosure. I asked, "Why didn't you just tell me?" "Because I knew what would happen." "What you'd call your father." The answer shocked me. "I have never used Dad against you." "I know." "Then why?" "Because once we separated, every Meridian Dawson interaction would look conflicted." There it was. He did not fear my revenge. He feared optics. Our marriage was supporting a professional narrative he still needed. He wanted to end it only after the narrative paid out. I stood. James said, "Rebecca." "No. Please." I looked at him. "Do you understand what you just told me?" "Yes." "No. You told me you kept me married because my existence stabilized your lender relationship. That's not why I stayed married." "Then why delay telling me he had no answer that improved it?" I sat back down because anger was making me shake. "James said I did love you." Past tense. I noticed. So did I. Do. I looked at him. He corrected himself. I do. That was worse. Love was not the missing ingredient. Respect was. He continued. I convinced myself timing mattered. The bank was under pressure. My promotion was uncertain. Vanessa was pushing me. You and I had been distant. Stop. What? Don't put Vanessa in the sentence as pressure. He looked away. Fine. You made choices. Yes. Why use my father internally? I didn't use him. You wrote that you could read Dawson through family channels. Because I could. Through me. Sometimes. Without telling me. Would you have agreed? No. Exactly. The word came out automatically. He heard it. We both did. Exactly. He had just defined his logic. If asking might produce no, do not ask. Use what is available. I said, that is why we're done. He looked at me. Because of the phrase, because the phrase explains everything. The trips, the seat, the relationship map, the delayed repayment, the hidden divorce papers, the drag. Would you have agreed? No. Exactly. He had built a life around avoiding refusals before they could exist. James leaned back. So, you're filing, yes. His face changed. Not surprise. Loss. Today, probably. Can we wait until the funding decision? I laughed. He flinched. Not cruelly. I could not stop. James. I know how it sounds. No. I don't think you do. If you file now, reporters will connect it. They will connect it whenever I file. Meridian is negotiating. I'm not Meridian. The market doesn't care. There is no market for our marriage. You know what I mean. I do. I stood. And that is the problem. I filed for divorce 2 days later. Not to punish him. Not because my father sat in seat 8. Because even after everything, James asked me to schedule my own marriage around the bank's funding process. The filing became public. Reporters connected it. Exactly as James predicted. Meridian exec's wife files for divorce amid internal review. The bank survived the headline. Imagine that. The next day, Treasury presented final funding options to the board. No markets collapsed. No deposits ran. No corporate clients panicked because Rebecca Calloway filed Form Whatever in family court. James had spent years making every personal sacrifice sound necessary to preserve a fragile professional world. The world was less fragile than he needed it to be. That realization made leaving easier. The divorce had one direct financial complication. James owned Meridian stock and deferred compensation. I had ordinary marital rights in some portions. Dawson Ridge was a Meridian creditor. My father had a family relationship to me. Caroline brought in a separate divorce specialist, Elena Ruiz. So, no one advising me on marital assets touched the credit process. Clean rolls. James's lawyers requested the same. Good. Neither side wanted a divorce, settlement interpreted as leverage over the bank. For once, we agreed before lawyers argued. The bank's review continued. Vanessa resigned, not immediately. She negotiated. Meridian concluded she had failed to disclose the affair, participated in misclassified personal expenses, used executive office authority to discourage expense scrutiny, and held herself out as future chief of staff without approval. It also concluded she had kept a personal allocation spreadsheet and later cooperated substantially. She repaid her share of personal costs, forfeited an unvested retention award, received ordinary accrued compensation, signed no agreement requiring her to call the affair a misunderstanding. She left. I did not meet her. She sent no apology. I preferred that. Not every woman connected by a man's deception needs a healing conversation. Vanessa had made choices. So had I. Distance was enough. James reimbursed Meridian for identified personal expenses attributed to him. Final amount, $53. 420 plus tax adjustments. Less than the internet believed. More than policy allowed. He also repaid the bank for the personal portion of certain joint charges that Vanessa had separately covered in her settlement. The total did not threaten Meridian. The certifications did. The relationship representations did. The interference with Tessa's review did. And the physical conduct at the gala did. The board risk committee scheduled a final employment hearing. James was still on paid leave. He remained an employee. Still drew salary. Still owned stock. Still had clients asking for him. His future was not obvious. That uncertainty made the hearing more honest. If firing him had been predetermined the night my father sat down, everything after would have been theater. It wasn't. 3 directors wanted termination. 2 wanted demotion and control restrictions. 1 believed he should return after reimbursement and discipline because his commercial value remained exceptional. Olivia Mercer had not decided. Neither had the board chair. The person who spoke before them last was Tessa Monroe, not because she was asked what punishment James deserved, because the board wanted to understand what his influence felt like from 4 floors below. She said, "I did not think Mr. Teen Calloway was trying to steal $60,000. The room shifted. I thought he believed his work was important enough that documentation could be fixed later. That was the whole case. Then when people at my level question someone at his level, we are not deciding whether his relationship trip was valuable. We are asking whether the record matches the policy. If the answer is that senior people operate differently, put that in the policy. Do not make us discover it by being told to stop asking." Olivia wrote something down. Tessa continued, "I don't need Mr. Calloway fired for me. I need the next analyst to know escalation doesn't become a career problem." That was all. No revenge. No speech about courage. A control employee asking for a control that works. The board recessed. James sat in another room. I was not there. My father was not there. Dawson Ridge was not there. For the first time since the gala, James's future depended on a room with no Dawsons in it. The board voted the next morning. 5-1. James was terminated for cause. Not for adultery. Not because my father disliked him. Not because $60,000 threatened a $30 billion bank. The termination letter identified 4 grounds: failure to disclose and properly manage a personal relationship with an employee whose expenses and authority he supervised, certification of expenses containing material personal components without timely reimbursement or adequate classification, inaccurate or insufficiently supported representations of access to a major institutional creditor, Interference with control review by attempting to discourage escalation and remove an analyst from relevant work. The gala conduct appeared in a fifth paragraph. Leadership and workplace judgment inconsistent with executive responsibilities. No dramatic language. No, you dragged the wrong man's daughter. That would have made the whole process smaller. James appealed internally. Meridian's bylaws allowed executive officers a review by the board's independent directors. He argued the sanction was disproportionate. He had produced enormous revenue. Clients trusted him. Expenses were repaid. No confidential Dawson information had been obtained. No lender terms were forged. No bank losses resulted from the relationship representations. All true. Then he argued the review was irreparably influenced by the simultaneous presence of William Dawson at the gala and Dawson Ridge's leverage over Meridian's funding. Also not absurd. The independent directors hired separate counsel to assess process integrity. They examined the timeline. Tessa's ticket opened 6 weeks before gala. Internal audit escalation 12 days before. Dawson Ridge had not been notified. William Dawson had not been involved. The bank's funding review began before my father's entrance. Employment decision-makers excluded Dawson representatives. Dawson Ridge's independent credit team negotiated separately. The bank had competing funding options. The process was not perfect, but it was documented. James's appeal failed. 4-0. Then Olivia Mercer told him something that may have hurt more than termination. The chief commercial officer role had never been scheduled for announcement at the gala. James had assumed it. The board had planned to announce David Knox's retirement in January and begin a formal search. James was a leading internal candidate. Not selected. Not promised. No succession announcement had been on the run sheet. Vanessa had seen a preliminary talent planning document through executive office preparation. The document listed internal successor possibilities: James Calloway, Amara Lewis, Peter Sloan. External search recommended. Vanessa focused on the first name. James did too. From that, they built future chief commercial officer, future chief of staff, post-renewal divorce, expense cleanup, new office, new reporting line. A whole life assembled from a list of candidates. When Olivia told him, James said, "You were going to pick me." I might have. Everyone knew. No. David knew. David thought you were strong. Then what was missing? Olivia's answer appeared in her board note. I did not know whether you could lead people who were allowed to tell you no. That sentence was almost identical to the independent director's question. The irony was brutal. James had planned his future around the exact qualification he had not yet proved. After termination, he did something I did not expect. He apologized to Tessa. Through HR. 1 paragraph. Ms. Munro, I treated your control question as an obstacle because I believed my relationship work justified a different level of discretion. My communication with your manager was inappropriate. You were doing the job the bank assigned you. I am sorry. James Calloway. Tessa accepted the apology. She did not request a meeting. She did not become an overnight executive. Meridian adjusted her performance review to remove language influenced by James and gave her a normal merit increase at year-end. That was enough. Institutions often ruin lessons by turning ordinary employees into symbolic heroes. Tessa wanted a career, not a statue. The bank changed its travel policy. Post-event personal extensions had to be separated at booking, where practical. Executive relationship expenses required named external purpose or written exception. Delegated approval could not be used where the delegate was a beneficiary of the expense. Control escalations involving senior management bypassed the business unit. Personal reimbursements had to occur within 30 days, not after compensation cycles. Boring controls. Good. Then came the funding vote. Meridian's board chose the diversified structure. Option C. Dawson Ridge 28%, Arbor Crest 24%. 2 insurance credit funds 18 and 15. Several smaller participants the rest. $1 billion total commitment. Pricing about 12 basis points more expensive than the cheapest concentrated proposal. 12 basis points. Not 30. Negotiation narrowed the gap. Over 4 years. Still, real money. Olivia defended it to shareholders. The bank is paying a modest premium for greater funding diversity and reduced key relationship concentration. No mention of me. No mention of Dad. Dawson Ridge's managing partner. Andrew Bell. Led the lender side. My father did not sign the ceremonial copy. He was still chairman of the investment council, but he refused to become the visual center. When the facility was announced 3 weeks after the gala, Meridian held a webcast. No ballroom. No seat 8. Olivia spoke. Treasury spoke. Andrew Bell spoke. Arbor Crest spoke. James did not. My father watched from Maine. He texted me, "They survived without my chair." I replied barely. He sent a thumbs up. My father is terrible at texting. The funding closed. Meridian paid more interest than under the original plan. It also gained lender diversity. The bank was not financially rescued by my family. It refinanced through a market process. That distinction mattered to me. Then James filed a wrongful termination arbitration. I learned from public disclosures after Meridian mentioned the claim as an employment matter. He did not sue my father. Did not sue me. He challenged the bank. His argument, termination for cause, deprived him of deferred compensation and was influenced by conflicts. Financially, the difference was large. If terminated without cause, he would keep portions of unvested awards. For cause, he lost several $1 million of future compensation. Now the process would be tested by someone whose money depended on finding flaws. Good. Meridian could not claim governance mattered and then fear scrutiny. Arbitration took 11 months. Not public. Key results later appeared through a settlement disclosure. James withdrew the wrongful termination challenge. Meridian reclassified one narrow portion of a prior performance award not connected to the misconduct and paid it under a compromise. No admission by either side. Why settle? Because litigation risk has a price, even when a company believes it is right. James received less than he wanted. More than zero. The bank avoided another year of executive discovery. No cinematic total victory. The documents remained. My divorce moved more slowly. James's termination changed his income. The funding close changed his deferred compensation. Our house had appreciated. I had my consulting income. We had retirement accounts. No secret fortune. The most contested asset was not money. It was a vacation house in Rockport. We bought it 6 years earlier. Small. Gray shingles. Ocean view from one upstairs window, if you leaned left. My father did not buy it. James and I did. It was the one place where banking used to disappear. Then I discovered Vanessa had been there. Not through an audit. Through a linen receipt. During divorce inventory, a housekeeping service produced access logs. James had taken Vanessa to Rockport twice while telling me he was using the house for solo work weekends. That hurt differently from corporate travel. The bank's money was not involved. No controls. No governance. No father. Just marriage. For a week. I wanted the house only because she had been inside it. Then Elena Roos, my divorce lawyer, asked, "Do you actually want to live there?" I did not. Then why fight because he took her? That is not a property valuation. I hated her. For 12 minutes. Then I agreed. We sold Rockport. Split proceeds according to settlement. The buyer was a retired couple from Connecticut who cared only about the roof. Good. A place should not have to carry every person who slept there. James and I settled the rest without trial. I kept my retirement. He kept his post-separation, consulting income. Meridian stock and deferred awards were divided according to marital portions and actual vesting outcomes. We sold the primary house. I received an equalization payment. Neither party claimed Dawson family assets. That last term was obvious, legally. Still, James's lawyer insisted on writing it clearly. No marital claim to Dawson Ridge interests owned by William Dawson or related family entities not held by Rebecca. Fine. Then James proposed a recital. The parties acknowledged that marital dissolution occurred during a period of extraordinary professional stress arising from Meridian's funding transition. I laughed. Another institution asked to carry part of the blame. I rejected it. We replaced the recital with, "The parties have determined that the marriage is irretrievably broken." True enough. At the final mediation, James asked to speak to me alone for 10 minutes. Elena looked at me. My choice. I said yes. He entered the room carrying no folder. That alone felt strange. He sat across from me, not beside me. I heard the bank close the funding. Yes. I know. Then why, say, heard he almost smiled. Habite? Silence. Then I was wrong about the seat. I looked at him. Which part? All of it. He continued. I told myself Vanessa needed to be there because she did the work. She did do work. Yes. And I also wanted people to see her beside me. Why? Because I thought the next role was mine. I waited. I wanted the room to adjust before anyone officially announced anything, including our marriage. He looked down. Yes. There was no defense. Then, when you refused to move, it felt like you were rejecting the future. I had already arranged. That sentence explained the force in his hand better than anger did. He had treated a future as property. My refusal made it uncertain. He grabbed me to restore the picture. I am sorry, he said. I believe you. He looked up. Does that help some? Does it change anything? No. He nodded. I appreciated that he did not ask again. Then he said, I used to think your father was powerful because people stood when he entered. I thought about the gala. What do you think now? He's powerful because he can leave a room and the process still works. That answer surprised me. It also told me James had finally understood something I had only recently learned myself. I signed the divorce settlement 2 hours later. No dramatic final line. No one applauded. The marriage ended on paper. C-date remained at the Halcyon Hotel. Meridian's internal review should have ended with James. It did not. 2 months after the funding closed, the bank's regulator asked for the board report. Not because the affair mattered, because the report described executive interference with expense controls, informal relationship representations involving a major creditor, and delegated approval weaknesses. The regulator wanted to know whether James was an exception or a symptom. Meridian hired an outside firm to perform a broader control review before anyone forced it to. The results were uncomfortable. James was the worst example. He was not the only one. 7 senior executives had used relationship development codes with incomplete attendee records. 3 had extended legitimate business trips for personal reasons and reimbursed late. 2 had used executive assistants to route expenses where the assistant was also traveling. Several officers described personal contacts with investors or clients in internal memos more confidently than the source material supported. Nothing matched James's full pattern. No other affair surfaced. No other analyst had been pushed away from a review. No one else had used a spouse's family relationship as internal relational capital. Still, the culture had rewarded ambiguity. Olivia Mercer presented the findings to employees. She could have said, "We had one bad actor." She did not. She said, "We had a senior executive who crossed lines." We also had an institution that made some of those lines easier to cross because successful people were often allowed to explain the rule after the fact. That sentence cost her political capital. Some directors thought she was making the bank sound worse than necessary. A communications advisor suggested isolated control gaps. Olivia refused. Isolated means disconnected. They were not. Meridian created an executive expense and relationship standard. Terrible name. Important policy. Key rules: personal relationships with direct or indirect reports required disclosure where conflicts could affect compensation. Travel. Expenses. Or authority. No executive could approve expenses for someone with whom they had a disclosed intimate relationship. Relationship development records did not require every coffee to become a compliance memo. But claims about specific institutional views had to distinguish fact, inference, and personal impression. No employee could attribute a view to a client, creditor, regulator, or investor, unless the source was identified or the statement was clearly labeled as interpretation. Control staff performance reviews involving executives they had challenged received independent review for retaliation risk. That last rule existed because of Tessa. She hated that people said it was the Tessa rule. She told HR, "Please stop naming things after me." They did. Officially, unofficially. Bankers are impossible. The broader review also found the executive travel policy itself had become absurdly complex. 32 pages. 6 exception categories. 3 legacy systems. 2 corporate card platforms. People made mistakes because rules were difficult to follow. Meridian simplified. Controls are not stronger because there are more words. That idea changed my view of James slightly. He had exploited ambiguity. The institution had supplied plenty. Responsibility remained his. Context became more complete. Olivia remained bank president. Some shareholders asked why. If executive culture failed under her leadership, why keep her? The board answered with a formal performance review. She had created a culture that overvalued speed, failed to challenge James's relationship mythology early, and allowed senior exceptions to accumulate. She had also ordered the audit preserved, separated lender and employment decisions, supported broader review, disclosed her own management failure, and implemented remediation. The board reduced her annual incentive, extended the separation between president and board chair, added an independent risk specialist to the board. It kept her accountability without ritual sacrifice. That phrase came from my father. Istola it. Not financially. I began using it in my own work. Municipal financing has its own version of personality risk. Mayors, hospital CEOs, university presidents, development directors. People become synonymous with projects. Then bond documents remind everyone that institutions have to survive elections, retirements, scandals, and ordinary human error. I accepted a consulting project for a city transit authority, rebuilding an old terminal. The authority's finance director recognized me from the gala video. I knew because he looked at my arm before looking at my face. The bruises were long gone. Still, at our second meeting, he finally said, "My wife saw that video." I smiled. Most wives apparently did. He turned red. "Then, was that really your father's seat?" I laughed. "Eventually." "What does that mean?" I explained the 2-stage seating plan. "My chair for dinner. Dad's for the announcement." He looked disappointed. "So, the internet version is wrong?" "Usually." "Still a good story." "It was a terrible evening." His face changed. "Sorry." I nodded. Then we returned to debt service. That was when I knew the public story no longer owned me. I could move from seat 8 to municipal bonds in one sentence. My father had his own reckoning. Dawson Ridge's Conflicts Committee reviewed not only Colin Reeves, but founder dependents. The firm had spent years marketing itself as institutional. Yet borrower executives still treated access to William Dawson as special. Sometimes Dawson Ridge benefited from that mystique. Companies liked believing the founder cared. Limited partners liked seeing him at annual meetings. Junior employees liked saying William thinks. My father had retired from operations without retiring from symbolism. The committee recommended no borrower relationship memo should use founder-family connection as a relationship category unless directly relevant and approved by compliance. William would no longer chair borrower-specific credit reviews. The investment council would elect an independent chair. He could remain a member. Dad hated the third recommendation. Independent chair, you said you were retired. I am. Then why do you care? Because I founded the council. That sounds familiar. He stared at me. I smiled. He did not. 2 weeks later, he voted for Andrew Bell as chair. Unanimous. Then called me. I hope you're pleased. Extremely. Children become unbearable when they discover governance. You taught me. I regret it. He remained influential. Of course, founder influence does not vanish because minutes say independent chair, but the decision reduced automatic authority. W. A month later, a borrower CEO called Dad directly about a credit dispute. Old William would have listened. Then called the team. New William said, talk to Andrew. The CEO replied, but William Andrew chairs it. Dad told me the story, with the pride of a man who had successfully not interfered. Did you want to desperately? Growth. Don't patronize me. We laughed. That was the best outcome of the whole bank scandal for him. Not that his fund kept Meridian, that he discovered power can be exercised by refusing the shortcut everyone expects you to take. James learned the same lesson more painfully. After the arbitration ended, he disappeared from banking for almost a year. Not literally. He taught a short course in relationship management at a business school. That caused controversy. A trade columnist wrote, former Meridian exec to teach relationship banking after relationship scandal. James should have expected that. Maybe he did. The course description surprised me. Relationship value without relationship capture. I almost laughed. Then I read the syllabus, because curiosity is an illness. Topics: key person risk, client ownership versus institutional ownership, relationship documentation, informal influence, conflict, disclosure, succession. When personal access becomes organizational dependency, he had turned his failure into curriculum. Part of me resented that. People often get paid to explain lessons other people paid to survive. Then I thought about my own transit authority presentation. I had used the phrase, institutional memory should not depend on one executive. Also learned from James. Maybe lessons do not belong exclusively to the injured person. I stopped being angry. Eventually, a smaller commercial finance company hired James as a senior advisor. Not president. Not chief commercial officer. His contract reportedly included no direct expense approval, no personnel supervision, client transition goals, mandatory compliance review. I know that because the company disclosed senior advisor terms in a litigation filing unrelated to me, I did not search for them. A friend sent the article. I deleted it. James's future was no longer my compliance project. Vanessa's future became even less relevant. I heard from Caroline that she joined an executive search firm. Nothing more. Good. I did not need every character to remain inside the story forever. The divorce became final 14 months after the gala. James and I signed by video from separate offices. The judge asked whether the settlement was voluntary. Yes. Whether I understood it. Yes. Whether anyone pressured me. No. The last answer made me think of seat 8. Of James's hand around my arm. Of the way I had walked because resisting would have made the scene worse. Legal voluntariness is not a metaphor. Still? I felt the contrast. The judge signed. That was it. 11 years of marriage ended in 12 minutes. Caroline called afterward. How do you feel? Like I need lunch. That was honest. I ate noodles alone. No champagne. No speech. No father. Perfect. Then, almost exactly 1 year after the original gala, Meridian sent my father an invitation. 101st anniversary dinner. He showed it to me. Are you going? No. Why not? I already know what the chairs look like. I laughed. The invitation included a handwritten note from Olivia. William, no funding announcement this year. Just dinner. Dad attended. I did not. At 9:40. Il sent ma photographe? Table 14. He was sitting with Tessa Monroe, 2 internal auditors, a branch manager, an equipment finance officer, and an older woman from compliance. I called him. Why are you at 14? Olivia asked where I wanted to sit. And I said somewhere nobody stands. I smiled. How's the food? Bad. Tradition. Then he turned the phone slightly. I could hear laughter. Normal galanoise. No doors opening. No executives standing. No one being dragged. Seat 8 still existed at the VIP table. Another creditor representative sat there, exactly as they should. The chair had never been sacred. Only the role assigned to it for one moment. That realization completed something in me. The public story did cost me something. For months, I pretended it did not. My consulting practice had 12 active clients when the gala video spread. Municipal agencies, nonprofits, 2 hospital systems, a university, a transportation authority. Within 3 weeks, 1 prospective client withdrew. The email said, given recent publicity involving your family and institutional finance relationships, our committee believes another advisor would present fewer perceived conflicts. I read it twice. Then called Caroline. Can they do that? Of course. Is it fair? Different question. I hated that answer. The committee was not accusing me of misconduct. They did not want headlines. A project involving public debt and a consultant whose billionaire father had just appeared in viral bank footage created distraction. I lost the engagement. Not financially devastating. Emotionally precise. For years. James had benefited from being married to William Dawson's daughter. Now I was penalized for the same connection. Influence cuts both directions. Another client asked me to complete a conflict questionnaire. Question: do you or immediate family members maintain financial interests with institutions that may participate in project financing? I stared at it. My father had investments everywhere. Not literally. Enough to make the question complicated. I disclosed. Dawson Ridge could potentially hold debt associated with infrastructure markets. I did not control its investments. I received no borrower information. My consulting scope excluded lender selection, where a conflict emerged. The client kept me. Then my own lawyer asked, why haven't you had a formal policy like this before? Because I don't work for Dad. That's not the question. Again, people around William Dawson had spent years believing boundaries were obvious because everyone knew the family. That is not how controls work. Obvious to whom I created a written conflict policy for my practice. If Dawson Ridge or an affiliated fund became a material financing participant in a project I advised, I disclosed the relationship. I did not evaluate the fund's bid. An independent consultant handled comparative lender analysis where necessary. Client chose whether to retain me. It felt excessive. Then one day, it saved a project. A transit client received competing financing proposals. Dawson Ridge appeared in one consortium. I disclosed immediately. The board chair said, "We trust you." I replied, "That's not the point." The word surprised me. Trust is not a control. We brought in another advisor for that portion. Dawson Ridge did not win. My father never called. I did not ask why. The project moved forward. I felt strangely proud. Not because Dad lost business. Because nothing in our relationship needed to change after the decision. That is what clean boundaries buy. James and I had confused closeness with access. I was learning another way. My father noticed. At dinner one Sunday, he said, "Your firm sent a conflict notice to us." It did. Compliance flagged it. Good. You excluded yourself from lender evaluation. Yes. I taught you too well. You did not teach me that. He stared. Fair. Then, do you realize you may lose work because of me? I already did? His face changed. What I told him about the withdrawn engagement. He became angry. Who no? I didn't ask to retaliate. You asked who? Because I'm curious. Dad. He leaned back. Fine. I watched him struggle not to reach for influence. Then he said, "I'm sorry. For being my father. For spending your childhood. Making the Dawson name useful enough that people now treat it as a risk. That was not entirely his fault." Still. I appreciated the sentence. The professional fallout made me understand James's temptation better without excusing it. When a name opens doors, refusing to use it can feel performative. When a relationship creates access, pretending it creates none can be false. The answer is not denial. It is disclosure and role clarity. James could truthfully say, "My father-in-law founded Dawson Ridge. I have family familiarity but no authority to speak for him or the fund." Instead, he wrote, "Family Channel indicates." That was the difference. Not whether the relationship existed. How he represented it. I began explaining that distinction in my consulting work. A university finance committee once asked how to disclose a board member's friendship with a potential underwriter. One trustee said, "We all know each other." "This city is small," I replied, "exactly why the record should be clear." The trustee laughed. "You're intense about this." "I've had a year." He did not understand. That was fine. Meridian's broader review became public in a sanitized governance report. Shareholders initially reacted badly. One activist investor argued the bank had become bureaucratically self-conscious. He proposed cutting compliance spending and tying executive pay more directly to return on equity. Olivia invited him to present. He did. Tessa sat in the back. The activist said no bank ever grew by teaching revenue producers to fear expense analysts. A few directors nodded. Then the board's new risk specialist asked, how much growth should depend on an employee being afraid to ask a senior banker for a receipt? Silence. The proposal failed. Not because compliance always wins. Because the debate became specific. That mattered. Meridian's financial performance the next year was ordinary. Funding cost rose slightly. Credit losses stayed manageable. Commercial revenue dipped after James left. Then recovered. 2 of his former clients moved. 3 new ones joined. Amara Lewis became head of strategic accounts. An external candidate became chief commercial officer. Not James. Not someone he had chosen. Amara was asked whether she wanted the chief commercial job. She declined. That surprised everyone. Why I like clients. I don't want a management committee. A senior executive saying no to promotion without being treated as irrational became one of Olivia's favorite examples of cultural change. People should be allowed to refuse even good opportunities. That lesson kept appearing lauder to honor. James and I sold our primary home after the divorce. The closing agent asked whether I wanted the proceeds wired to an account at Meridian. I laughed. No. She looked embarrassed. Sorry. It's fine. I chose another bank. Not because Meridian had wronged me. Because I wanted fewer symbolic relationships in my life. The apartment I bought afterward was smaller. 2 bedrooms. Brick walls. No dining room large enough for 12 people. My father hated the kitchen. Where do you put things? In cabinets. There aren't enough. There are for one person. He stopped. That sentence made the apartment real. One person. Not lonely. Specific. I bought one large chair for the living room. Deep blue. Ridiculously comfortable. When the furniture company delivered it, the driver asked, "Where do you want it?" I almost laughed. By the window. No seating plan. No VIP table. No transaction principal. No assistant replacing me. Just my chair. For a few months, that felt almost too symbolic. Then it became furniture. That is how healing should work. Objects become ordinary again. The marks on my arm disappeared in 9 days. The feeling of being moved took longer. At restaurants, if someone reached past me to pull my chair, I tensed. At conferences, assigned seating irritated me. At one event, an organizer said, "We moved you to make room for a more senior guest." Perfectly reasonable. I had to go to the restroom and breathe. Trauma does not care whether the current seating coordinator is innocent. I told my therapist, Dr. Helen Morris. She asked, "What does being moved mean to you now that someone decided my place is negotiable? Is it always no? Then what's missing?" My choice. There. Again. The chair was never the issue. Choice. At the Meridian Gala, I could have moved voluntarily. I might have. If James said, "Rebecca, Vanessa needs to sit here for the presentation. The event coordinator will move you beside Olivia after dinner. Is that okay?" Maybe I would have said yes. If I knew Dad was taking the chair later, I almost certainly would have. Instead, James ordered. Vanessa mocked. He grabbed. I became an obstacle to a picture they had already designed. That is why the title version is both true and incomplete. My husband dragged me from a VIP table for his mistress. Yes. But the deeper violation was not that she got a better chair. It was that he assumed he could physically relocate me when persuasion failed. My father taking the chair afterward was satisfying. I will not pretend otherwise. For a few seconds, I enjoyed James's face. I enjoyed Vanessa standing. I enjoyed the bank president standing first. I enjoyed the sudden reversal in status. That does not make me noble. It makes me human. But the moment would have become dangerous if I had mistaken satisfaction for justice. Justice came later. Odzi. Review. Repayment. Employment decision. Funding diversification. Divorce. Policies. Choices made by people who did not share my anger. Slower. Less virile. More trustworthy. That became the part of the story I valued. 3 years after the gala, I returned to the Halcyon Hotel. Not for Meridian. My transit authority client was holding a bond financing dinner in the West Ballroom. Different room. Same lobby. I almost did not notice until the elevator doors opened, and I saw the sign East Ballroom Private Event. The room from that night was behind the doors. I had 20 minutes before my own dinner. I stood in the hallway. No panics. No dramatic memory sequence. Mostly curiosity. A hotel employee rolled a cart past me. One of the carts held brass table numbers. I saw 6, 7, 8, 9. Seat 8 had never been a permanent object. Of course not. Hotels reuse everything. The number that had felt like destiny was one piece of brass in a plastic bin. I started laughing. The employee looked at me. "Everything okay?" "Yes." I pointed at the numbers. "Just remembered something." He nodded politely and kept moving. "Perfect." I did not enter the East Ballroom. I did not need to. At the West Ballroom, my client had assigned seating. My place card sat beside a state treasurer and across from a public bond lawyer. Normal work. halfway through dinner. Someone approached. William Dawson. My father. I stared. What are you doing here? He looked offended. I was invited. By whom? The pension consortium. Of course. His retirement had become more theoretical again. He pointed to the empty chair beside me. May I? I looked at the place card. It belonged to a guest who had canceled. I said, ask the organizer. Dad laughed. Seriously, governance? He actually asked. The organizer said yes. Then he sat. No one stood. The state treasurer said, Bill. Good to see you. That was all. For dinner. Dad listened to municipal bond people argue about pension liabilities. He hated municipal bonds. He pretended not to. At dessert? He leaned toward me. Do you remember seat 8? I just saw the table number on a cart. He looked delighted. They reuse it, Dad. I know. Obviously. We both laughed. Then he said, I still think about that night. So do I. Not the way you think. What way I think about Olivia standing first. I smiled. Why? Because everyone tells the story as if she stood for me. Didn't she partly? What else? She had just decided the funding announcement would be paused. I looked at him. Before you sat down, yes. That was new. How quickly she saw your arm. Nina told her, James had pulled you. Internal audit already had open questions. Olivia decided the bank could not stage a triumphant funding announcement until she knew whether the executive leading the relationship had created a governance problem. So when she stood, she was standing to greet a lender whose announcement she had just canceled. I laughed. That is less cinematic. Much better. Yes. The most viral visual in the story had contained its own hidden contradiction. The bank president stood for my father, then refused to give him the moment everyone assumed he had come to claim. That was leadership. Courtesy without surrender. Status without obedience. Dad said, I learned from her. You learned a lot in your 70s. Woede. Accurate. He took a bite of pie. Then, did James ever apologize for using your name? Not specifically. He should. I don't need it. That sounds healthy and irritating. Thank you. A month later, James did. Not because my father summoned him. Sophie, no, Sophie. In this story. That was another family. Another memory. James and I no longer shared relatives beyond friends. So the message came directly through email. Subject: one thing I never said. Rebecca. I apologized for the travel. Vanessa. The gala. And the way I handled you. I never apologized for using your relationship with your father as professional currency. At the time, I told myself I was describing reality. I did know your family. I did understand some of William's habits. I did have access. Most bankers didn't. What I left out was that the access belonged to my marriage. Not my job. I converted private familiarity into institutional authority because it made me more valuable inside Meridian. I also spent years telling you that you were outside banking because that made it easier not to answer your questions. Both things can be true. And together they were unfair. I am sorry. James, I read it once. Then again. No request to meet. No story about professional stress. No promise he was a different person. Just the missing apology. I replied, thank you for naming it. That was all. Some apologies do not reopen doors. They label the correct file. I archived the message. Did not print it. Paper had become less important. James's career stabilized. I heard occasionally through industry news. He became a partner at a small advisory firm focused on client succession and institutional relationship transfer. That seemed almost too neat. Maybe life has a sense of humor. His firm published an article under his name, "The client does not belong to the banker." I refused to read it. Then curiosity won. The first paragraph said, "A relationship professional can create enormous value by earning personal trust. The risk begins when personal trust is treated as personal ownership." I closed the article. He had learned, or learned how to write about learning. Either way, the sentence was true. I did not need more. Meridian changed too. Olivia Mercer retired 2 years later. Not because of James. Age. Timing. Board succession. At her final shareholder meeting, she was asked what decision from her tenure she would most like to revisit. People expected an acquisition, a branch closure, a loan loss. She said I would have built stronger institutional ownership of client relationships earlier. Then when one banker becomes the story of why a client stays. The bank has created value and risk at the same time. James was not named. Everyone knew. Amara Lewis eventually became Chief Commercial Officer. The role James thought would be his. She built relationship teams instead of individual books. No single senior banker could own the only client history. Major accounts had 2 relationship leads. Succession plans existed before promotions. Assistant roles were separated from expense approval where conflicts could arise. That sounds administrative. It changed culture. Clients complained at first. "I only want James. I only want Amara. I only trust Olivia." Meridian's answer became, "You can have a lead banker. You cannot have a bank that disappears when they leave. That is a mature institution." Less romantic. More durable. Tessa Monroe stayed in expense controls for another year. Then moved to enterprise risk. No heroic promotion. No keynote speech. She completed a master's degree at night and later became director of operational risk analytics. When a trade journal profiled her, the reporter asked about the James Calloway investigation. She said it was one file. That answer made me smile. People who become symbols deserve to become people again. My father finally retired for real at 78. This time, Andrew Bell became chair of the investment council, and another executive became chairman of Dawson Ridge. Dad retained an office. Because founders are incapable of full surrender, his office had no staff. No direct phone line to borrower teams. He hated that, then loved it. He spent one afternoon a week reading investment memos and writing comments nobody had to accept. He called it freedom. I called it controlled withdrawal. At his retirement dinner, I sat beside him. No secret seating plan. My name card, Rebecca Dawson. Not Calloway. I had returned to my maiden name after divorce. The event coordinator asked whether I wanted to be introduced as William Dawson's daughter. I said only if you also introduce him as Rebecca Dawson's father. Dad approved enthusiastically. The MC did both. People laughed. Then Dad gave a speech. He thanked employees, partners, my mother, Andrew, his assistants. Then he said, "My daughter once taught me that if everyone in a room stands when you enter, you should ask whether you've made it too difficult for them to stay seated." I stared at him. He smiled. The room laughed. I almost cried. Then, he continued, "Good institutions should survive the absence of important people. The best thing Dawson Ridge can prove now is that it does not need me." That was the final version of the lesson. Not power is bad. Not founders should disappear. Not relationships do not matter. They matter. The question is whether they remain bounded by roles that outlive the people holding them. After the dinner, Dad and I walked outside. He said, "How was that too long? Your mother would have loved it. Mom would have cut 6 minutes." Probably. We stood near the curb, waiting for the car. Then he asked, "Do you regret texting me?" "No." The answer came immediately. "No." Even knowing the investigation already existed, yes. Why? Because I needed you in the room as my father. He looked at me. Not, as lender no. That was true. For all the governance lessons, I had still been a woman standing near a service door with fingerprints forming on her arm. I wanted my father. There is nothing institutionally embarrassing about that. The mistake would have been pretending his love gave him authority over everyone else. He did not make that mistake. Neither did I. At least not for long. I said I needed Dad. Meridian needed its board. Dawson Ridge needed its credit team. The marriage needed a lawyer. He smiled. Very efficient. Don't ruin it. We laughed. My own life became less connected to banking over time. I moved deeper into infrastructure consulting, stations, water systems, public buildings, university debt, transit projects. I liked assets people could touch. A renovated terminal is less abstract than relational capital. One project involved redesigning a regional bus hub where commuters fought constantly over limited seating. The architect proposed fixed benches. A disability advocate objected. A security consultant wanted fewer seats. Senior riders wanted more. Retail tenants wanted space for kiosks. The meeting became absurdly tense. Someone finally asked me, Rebecca, "What do you think?" I looked at the seating plan, then started laughing. Everyone waited. Sorry. I explained enough of the story to make them understand why the question was funny. Not the affair. Not Dad. Just I have history with contested seating. The room relaxed. Then we solved the actual problem. Flexible benches. Accessible spaces. Clear waiting zones. No one person's preferred layout one. A system designed for different needs. I left the meeting thinking about the gala. For years. I remembered seat 8 as proof of reversal. Vanessa sat. James dragged me away. Dad arrived. Vanessa stood. Dawn sat. It looks perfect in a story. Almost too perfect. But the seat itself taught nothing. Anyone can replace one person with another. That is still hierarchy. The deeper change came when everyone stopped treating chairs as evidence of who could speak for whom. James could sit at a VIP table without speaking for Dawson Ridge. Vanessa could be an excellent assistant without becoming an unapproved executive. My father could be a major creditor without controlling Meridian. I could be William Dawson's daughter without becoming his information channel. Tessa could be a junior analyst and still ask a senior banker for support. Olivia could stand for a lender and still pause his announcement. Meridian could value James and still terminate him. I could love James and still leave. Roles. Edges. Choice. Those words sound boring. They rebuilt my life. The title people remember is my husband dragged me from the VIP table for his mistress, then my father took his seat. True. But I no longer tell the story as if Dad taking the chair was the moment I won. I did not win a chair. I lost a marriage. James lost a job. Meridian paid more for diversified funding. Dawson Ridge had to examine founder dependence. Vanessa lost a career path she had expected. Tessa learned how easily senior influence can touch junior evaluations. Olivia had to admit a management culture she helped create. Everyone paid something. That is not revenge. It is consequence. The thing I gained was smaller and more useful. I stopped allowing other people to decide what my relationships authorized them to do. My marriage did not authorize James to speak for my father. My father's wealth did not authorize me to direct a bank. My knowledge did not authorize me to control an audit. My anger did not authorize retaliation. My love did not authorize James's hand around my arm. Once those lines became visible, the rest became easier. Not easy. Easier. Years after the gala, I found the black dress I wore that night in the back of my closet. I had not worn it again. Not because it was damaged. Because I associated the fabric with James's hand. I held it for a while, then donated it. No ceremony. The next week, I bought another black dress for a municipal finance dinner. Same color. Different cut. I wore it. Nothing happened. That was healing. The Halcyon remained a hotel. VIP tables remained tables. Bank presidents remained people. My father remained annoying about pie. James became someone I once loved. Vanessa became a name I rarely thought about. Seat 8 became a brass number on a cart. And the sentence I carried from that night changed too. James had said, "You're embarrassing me." At the time, I thought he meant I was making the room look wrong. Now I understand what embarrassed him. I refused to fit the picture he had already sold. Everyone. Wife in the background. Assistant at his side. Dawson relationship under his control. Renewal complete. Promotion next. Reimbursement later. Divorce later. Questions later. I stood in the wrong place and said no at the wrong time. That was enough to reveal how much of his future depended on everyone else staying where he put them. He dragged me away because he thought the table proved who mattered. Then my father walked in and sat in the chair. For a few minutes, James believed the lesson was that someone more powerful had replaced him. He was wrong. The lesson was that the chair belonged to a role. The credit belonged to an institution. The bank belonged to its governance. And my life belonged to me. My father took seat 8 once. I never needed it back. Scriptwriter Nguyen Van Chien.